In the quiet suburb of Maplewood, 10-year-old Lucas and his devoted companion, Max the Old English Sheepdog, were enjoying a carefree afternoon of play. But their bliss is shattered when two mysterious strangers suddenly appear, casting a dark, ominous shadow over the neighborhood. What terrifying events will unfold as Lucas is drawn into a chilling ordeal? And can Max rise to the challenge to protect his friend? Before continuing the story, tell me which city you're watching from. I want to know how far this video has come. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so I can send you exciting stories like this every day. Thank you. In the quiet suburb of Maplewood, where picket fences lined neatly trimmed lawns and children's laughter echoed through tree-lined streets, lived a boy named Lucas Bennett. At just 10 years old, Lucas was the embodiment of youthful exuberance, a whirlwind of energy with a mop of unruly brown hair and a smattering of freckles across his nose. Lucas's best friend wasn't a classmate instead, his constant companion was a large, shaggy Old English sheepdog named Max. Max belonged to the Johnsons, the elderly couple next door, but he spent most of his days with Lucas. Mrs. Johnson, a retired school teacher with kind eyes and silver hair always neatly pinned back, had taken to Lucas the moment the Bennett family moved in 5 years ago. "That boy needs a friend," she told her husband Samuel, "and Max needs someone to keep up with him." From that day forward, Max became Lucas's unofficial guardian. The pair was inseparable. Every afternoon, as soon as the school bus dropped Lucas off, he'd race to the Johnsons' backyard. Max would be waiting, tail wagging so hard his whole body shook with excitement. They'd spend hours playing fetch, rolling in the grass, or simply sitting together as Lucas read his latest comic book aloud, Max's head resting contentedly on the boy's lap. Lucas's parents, Emily and Robert Bennett, watched their son's friendship with Max blossom with a mixture of joy and amusement. "I swear that dog understands every word Lucas says," Emily would often remark, shaking her head in wonder as she watched them from the kitchen window. What no one realized was just how deep that bond ran, or how it would be tested in ways they could never have imagined. It was a balmy Saturday in late August when everything changed. The kind of day that seemed to stretch endlessly, filled with the lazy drone of cicadas and the sweet scent of ripening apples from old Mr. Jenkins's orchard down the street. Lucas had spent the morning helping his dad wash the car, suds flying everywhere as they engaged in an impromptu water fight. By lunchtime, he was itching to go play with Max. "Can I go to the Johnsons, Mom?" Lucas asked, bouncing on his toes as Emily set a plate of sandwiches on the table. Emily hesitated. "The Johnsons are visiting their daughter this weekend, remember? They won't be back until tomorrow night." Lucas's face fell for a moment before brightening again. "But Max is still there, right? Mrs. Johnson said I could play with him even when they're gone. Please, Mom, I'll be careful and make sure he has enough water and everything." Emily exchanged a glance with Robert, who shrugged and nodded. "All right," she conceded, "but be back by 4, okay? We're having dinner with Grandma tonight." Lucas whooped with joy, grabbed a sandwich, and was out the door in a flash, calling his thanks over his shoulder. As he rounded the corner of the Johnsons' house, he let out a sharp whistle. Almost immediately, Max's furry face appeared at the fence, eyes bright with excitement. Lucas unlatched the gate and was immediately bowled over by 80 pounds of ecstatic dog. "Hey, boy," Lucas laughed, trying to fend off Max's enthusiastic tongue. "You ready to play?" For the next couple of hours, the backyard was filled with the sound of Lucas's laughter and Max's happy barks as they chased each other around, played tug-of-war with an old rope toy, and finally flopped down in the shade of the big oak tree. Lucas was so caught up in telling Max about the book he just finished reading, a thrilling adventure story about a boy and his dog saving a town from disaster, that he didn't notice the beat-up van that had pulled up across the street. He didn't see the two men who got out, their eyes fixed on the oblivious boy and his canine companion. It wasn't until a shadow fell across him that Lucas looked up, startled. Two strangers loomed over him, their faces hidden by the glare of the sun behind them. "Hey, kid," one of them said, his voice gruff. "We're looking for a lost puppy. Think you could help us out?" Lucas hesitated, a tendril of unease curling in his stomach. His parents had warned him about strangers, but these men didn't look particularly threatening. One was tall and lanky, with a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. The other was shorter and stockier, with a neatly trimmed beard. Max, however, was instantly on alert. His hackles rose and a low growl rumbled in his chest. I don't know, Lucas stammered, getting to his feet. I haven't seen any lost puppies around here. The shorter man stepped closer, ignoring Max's increasingly threatening growls. Come on, it'll only take a minute. We've got some pictures in our van. Maybe you've seen it around the neighborhood? Every instinct Lucas had was screaming at him to run, but fear kept him rooted to the spot. Max positioned himself between Lucas and the strangers, his growls turning into sharp, angry barks. Shut that mud up, the taller man hissed, glancing nervously at the surrounding houses. It all happened so fast. The shorter man lunged forward, grabbing Lucas's arm. Max leaped, his teeth sinking into the man's leg. There was a shout of pain, a flash of metal, a knife, and suddenly Max yelped, falling back. Max! Lucas screamed, struggling against the iron grip on his arm. He caught a glimpse of blood matting Max's fur before a cloth was pressed against his face. A sickly sweet smell filled his nostrils, and the world began to spin. The last thing Lucas heard before darkness claimed him was Max's frantic barking, growing fainter as if from a great distance. When Emily glanced at the clock and realized it was nearly 5, her heart skipped a beat. Lucas was never late, not without calling or sending a message. She tried his cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. Robert, she called, trying to keep the panic out of her voice. Lucas is not back yet. I'm going to check the Johnsons. She hurried next door, her worry growing with each step. The gate to the backyard was open, swinging slightly in the breeze. As she rounded the corner, the scene that greeted her turned her blood to ice. Max was there, but he wasn't the bouncing, energetic dog she knew. He was lying on his side, his fur matted with blood, whimpering softly. And Lucas? Lucas was nowhere to be seen. Emily's scream brought the entire neighborhood running. What followed was a nightmare of flashing police lights, search parties combing the streets, and agonizing hours of waiting. Emily and Robert clung to each other, answering the same questions over and over, their voices hoarse from calling Lucas's name. Max had been rushed to the emergency vet, his condition critical. The police assured the Bennett that they were doing everything they could. But as night fell and there was still no sign of Lucas, hope began to fade. Miles away, in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, Lucas was just beginning to stir. His head pounded, and his mouth felt like it was stuffed with cotton. As awareness slowly returned, fear gripped him anew. He was in a small, dimly lit room, lying on a thin mattress on the floor. The only window was high up and barred. Panic rose in his throat as the memories came flooding back. The men, Max's growls, the cloth over his face. Hey, he shouted, his voice cracking. Let me out, please, I want to go home. The door opened and the 2 men from earlier entered. In the harsh fluorescent light, Lucas could see them clearly for the first time. The taller one had a thin, rat-like face and nervous eyes. The shorter one's beard didn't quite hide the ugly scar that ran from his ear to his chin. Pipe down, kid, Scarface growled. Nobody can hear you out here. What do you want? Lucas asked, hating how small and scared his voice sounded. My parents don't have much money. Ratface laughed, a high, unpleasant sound. This ain't about money, boy. You're our ticket to something much bigger. They refused to say more, leaving Lucas alone with his fear and a growing sense of despair. As he huddled on the mattress, trying not to cry, his thoughts turned to Max. Was he okay? Had the knife hurt him badly? The image of his friend lying bloody in the grass haunted him. What Lucas didn't know was that, at that very moment, Max was fighting for his life on an operating table and preparing for the most important mission of his life. Dr. Olivia Martinez had been a veterinarian for over 20 years, but she'd never seen a case quite like this. The Old English Sheepdog had been brought in with a deep stab wound to his side, having lost a dangerous amount of blood. But it wasn't just the severity of the injury that struck her, it was the dog's demeanor. Even as they prepped him for surgery, his eyes remained alert, fixed on the door as if waiting for someone. He whined continuously, not in pain, but in what Olivia could only describe as distress. "It's like he's trying to tell us something," she murmured to her assistant as they worked to close the wound. The surgery was touch and go, but Max proved to be a fighter. As Olivia was updating the police officer who had accompanied the dog to the clinic, a commotion from the recovery area caught her attention. Max, still groggy from anesthesia and attached to an IV, was struggling to his feet. "Whoa there, big guy," Olivia said soothingly, rushing to his side. "You need to rest." But Max was having none of it. He pulled against the floor, his eyes wild with determination. It took 3 staff members to keep him on the table. "I've never seen anything like it," Olivia told the officer, shaking her head in disbelief. "It's like he has some urgent mission. Animals can be incredibly intuitive. I can't help but wonder if this is somehow related to the missing boy." The officer, a seasoned canine handler named Ryan Mitchell, studied Max thoughtfully. He'd worked with police dogs for years and recognized the look in Max's eyes. It was the same intent as he saw his partners when they were on a scent. "Doc," he said slowly, "I know this sounds crazy, but I think we need to let him go." Olivia stared at him in shock. "Officer, he's just had major surgery. He shouldn't even be conscious right now, let alone moving around." "I understand," Ryan replied, "but my gut tells me this dog knows something we don't. He might be our best chance at finding that boy." It went against everything Olivia had been taught. But as she looked at Max, still straining against his restraints, eyes fixed on the door, she felt a flicker of something. Hope? Intuition? Whatever it was, it made her nod slowly. "All right," she said, "but I'm coming with you. He'll need medical attention, and I'm not letting him out of my sight." And so, in the pre-dawn hours of Sunday morning, a most unusual search party set out. Ryan in his patrol car, Olivia in her veterinary van, and Max, bandaged but determined, leading the way. At first, Max seemed disoriented, spinning in circles and whining. But as they reached the outskirts of town, his demeanor changed. He began to run with purpose, his nose to the ground, pausing only to ensure his human companions were keeping up. They wound through industrial areas, past shuttered factories and overgrown lots. Olivia's heart raced, torn between concern for Max's health and growing excitement. Could this really be happening? Finally, after nearly an hour, Max came to an abrupt halt in front of a dilapidated warehouse. His hackles raised and a low growl rumbled in his chest. Ryan called for backup immediately, his hand on his weapon as he approached the building. Olivia hung back with Max, marveling at the dog's stamina and determination. What happened next was a blur of activity. Police cars swarmed the area. Officers with guns drawn entered the warehouse. There were shouts, the sound of splintering wood, and then, "We've got him! The boy's here! He's alive!" Olivia burst into tears of relief, hugging Max gently. "You did it," she whispered. "You wonderful, brave boy." Inside the warehouse, a tearful and shaken Lucas was being checked over by paramedics. The 2 kidnappers had been caught completely off guard and were now in handcuffs, being led to waiting police cars. When Lucas saw Max, his face lit up with joy. He broke away from the paramedics and threw his arms around his furry rescuer, burying his face in Max's thick coat. "You came for me," he sobbed. "I knew you would. You're the best dog in the whole world." The reunion between Lucas and his parents was emotional and heartwarming. Emily and Robert couldn't stop hugging their son, tears streaming down their faces. But it was the moment they turned to Max that truly captured the depth of emotion. Robert knelt beside the dog, gently stroking his head. "Thank you," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "You saved our boy. We'll never be able to repay you." The story of Max's heroic rescue made headlines across the country. People were amazed by the dog's loyalty, intelligence, and sheer determination. Offers of rewards and dog food sponsorships poured in, but the Johnsons, who had rushed home as soon as they heard the news, declined them all. "Max didn't do this for reward," Samuel Johnson told reporters, his arm around his wife's shoulders. "He did it out of love. That's a bond you can't put a price on." The aftermath of the kidnapping brought many changes to Maplewood. The community came together, implementing new safety measures and starting a neighborhood watch program. But the most significant change was in the relationship between the Bennett and Johnson families. Realizing how much Max meant to Lucas and how much Lucas meant to Max, the two families came to an arrangement. Max would split his time between both houses with a special doggy door installed in the fence between their yards. As for the kidnappers, their capture led to the unraveling of a larger criminal operation. It turned out they had been part of a child trafficking ring, and their arrest led to the rescue of several other missing children. Lucas's bravery in testifying against them, with Max by his side for moral support, was instrumental in ensuring they received long prison sentences. The ordeal left its scars, both physical and emotional. Lucas had nightmares for months, often waking up in a cold sweat, calling for Max. But each time, the faithful dog was there, nuzzling his hand and standing guard until the boy fell back asleep. Max's wound healed, leaving a jagged scar that Lucas declared made him look even more heroic. The dog's already special status in the neighborhood reached near mythic proportions, with children and adults alike stopping to pat him and offer treats. For Lucas, the experience fostered a deep interest in law enforcement and animal rescue. As he grew older, he volunteered at the local animal shelter and decided he wanted to become a K-9 officer when he grew up. "I want to help other kids the way Max helped me," he told his parents on his 16th birthday. "And I want to work with dogs as brave and loyal as him." Emily and Robert exchanged a look, recognizing the determined set of their son's jaw. It was the same look Max got when he was on a mission, usually to steal socks or chase squirrels these days. But the intensity was the same. "Well," Robert said with a smile, "I think that's a pretty noble goal, and I can't think of anyone better suited for it." As the years passed, the bond between Lucas and Max remained as strong as ever. Even as Max's muzzle grew gray and his steps slowed, his devotion never wavered. And Lucas, growing into a tall, confident young man, never forgot the debt he owed his four-legged friend. On the day Lucas left for the police academy, Max was there to see him off, tail wagging despite the arthritis in his hips. Lucas knelt beside him just as he had countless times before. "I'll make you proud, boy," he whispered, scratching behind Max's ears. "Everything I do, every person I help, it'll be because of you. You taught me what real bravery and loyalty look like." Max woofed softly, as if understanding the gravity of the moment. As Lucas's car pulled away, the old dog watched until it disappeared around the corner, his tail finally dropping as he let out a small whine. Emily, who had been watching from the porch, came over and sat on the grass next to Max. "I know, boy," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I miss him already too, but he'll be back before we know it, and you've given him the strength to do amazing things." The months of Lucas's training at the academy were challenging, not just for him, but for those he left behind. Max spent long hours gazing out the window, perking up at every car that passed, hoping it was Lucas returning. The Johnsons and the Bennett took turns comforting the loyal dog, reminding him of the important work Lucas was doing. Lucas threw himself into his studies with the same determination Max had shown on that fateful night years ago. He excelled in his classes, particularly those involving canine units. His instructors were impressed by his natural affinity with the police dogs and his deep understanding of the bond between human and canine partners. During one of his weekend visits home, Lucas sat with Max under their favorite oak tree in the Johnsons' backyard. The old dog's muzzle was now completely white, and he moved with the careful deliberation of advanced age, but his eyes still shone with intelligence and love. "You know, Max," Lucas said, stroking the dog's thick fur, "every day at the academy, I think about you. When things get tough, I remember how you never gave up on me. It keeps me going." Max responded by resting his head on Lucas's lap, a gesture that had comforted the boy-turned-man countless times over the years. As Lucas's graduation from the academy approached, excitement built in the quiet suburb of Maplewood. The entire neighborhood, which had watched Lucas grow up and had rallied around the family during the kidnapping ordeal, planned to celebrate his achievement. The day before the ceremony, however, brought unexpected news. Max, now well into his senior years, collapsed while on his morning walk with Mrs. Johnson. The veterinarian's diagnosis was grim. Max's heart was failing, and he didn't have much time left. The news devastated Lucas, who had been looking forward to having Max at his graduation. He rushed home, his heart heavy with the thought of losing his oldest and dearest friend. When he arrived, he found Max lying in his bed in the Johnsons' living room, surrounded by both the Johnson and Andrews families. The old dog's tail thumped weakly against the bed as Lucas entered, his eyes lighting up at the sight of his boy. Lucas knelt beside the bed, tears streaming down his face as he gently hugged Max. "Hey, old friend," he whispered. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." Through the night, Lucas stayed by Max's side, reminiscing about their adventures, the games they'd played, and the lives they'd touched. As dawn broke, Max lifted his head one last time, licked Lucas's hand, and with a soft sigh, closed his eyes for the final time. The graduation ceremony was a bittersweet affair. Lucas accepted his badge with a heavy heart, but also with a renewed sense of purpose. In his speech to his fellow graduates, he spoke of Max's unwavering loyalty and courage. "We're here to protect and serve," he said, his voice strong despite his grief. "But we're also here to embody the very best qualities of humanity: loyalty, bravery, compassion." My dog Max taught me what those words truly mean. He saved my life, not just from kidnappers, but every day by showing me what it means to love unconditionally. As we go out into the world to serve our communities, let's carry those lessons with us. There wasn't a dry eye in the auditorium as Lucas concluded his speech. His parents, the Johnsons, and many of their Maplewood neighbors, who had made the trip to attend the ceremony, stood and applauded, their hearts full of pride and love. In the years that followed, Lucas became known as one of the most compassionate and effective officers in the department. He eventually realized his dream of becoming a canine handler, partnering with a young German shepherd named Max. Together, they made a formidable team specializing in finding missing children. Lucas never forgot Max's influence on his life. In his off-duty hours, he volunteered at local animal shelters and spoke at schools about responsible pet ownership and the incredible bonds that can form between humans and animals. He even started a program that paired rescue dogs with children who had experienced trauma, helping both to heal and find purpose. On the 5th anniversary of his graduation, Lucas returned to Maplewood for a special ceremony. The community had rallied together to create a small park in Max's honor, complete with a dog run and a beautiful bronze statue of an Old English Sheepdog. As Lucas stood before the gathered crowd to give a speech, he felt a lump form in his throat. He saw familiar faces, his parents, the Johnsons, old neighbors, and even some of the officers who had been involved in his rescue years ago. And there in the front row sat a group of children with their therapy dogs, all graduates of the program Lucas had started. "Max wasn't just a pet," Lucas began, his voice strong and clear. "He was a hero, a friend, and a teacher. He showed us that love knows no boundaries, not age, not species, not even life and death. His legacy lives on in every life he touched, in every child who finds comfort in a furry friend, in every rescue dog given a second chance." He paused, looking at the statue that captured Max's likeness so perfectly. The alert eyes, the shaggy coat, the stance that always seemed ready for action, or a good belly rub. "Max taught me that true strength isn't about physical power or authority. It's about compassion, about never giving up on those you love, about facing your fears to help others. These are lessons I carry with me every day as a police officer, as a dog handler, and as a person." Lucas's gaze swept over the audience, seeing tears in many eyes, but also smiles of understanding and agreement. This park isn't just a memorial, it's a promise to carry forward the spirit of love and loyalty that Max embodied. It's a place where new friendships will form, where children will learn the joy of playing with a dog, where our community can come together and remember that sometimes our greatest heroes have 4 legs and a tail. As Lucas finished his speech, a soft breeze rustled through the trees, carrying with it the sound of distant barking. For a moment, Lucas could almost imagine Max there beside him, tail wagging, ready for their next adventure. The legacy of a boy and his dog, a legacy of love, bravery, and unwavering friendship, would continue to inspire and touch lives for generations to come. And in the quiet suburb of Maplewood, in a small park with a bronze statue, the spirit of a heroic Old English sheepdog named Max would forever stand guard, a testament to the extraordinary depths of the bond between humans and their animal companions. If this story has touched your heart and soul, please hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel so you won't miss any more inspiring and moving videos. Every subscription is not just a vote of support, but a boost of motivation that enables us to continue sharing meaningful stories that open new perspectives on life and humanity. Join our community, spread the love and hope, and become a part of our journey.